Okay, everyone, hello and welcome to this session of STEM Quest 3.0. Please give a very warm welcome to Shayleen. She is a PhD student in space biology, a neuroscience researcher, and an overall wonderful person to have here at STEM Quest 3.0. Shayleen, we're so happy that you're here with us, and we cannot wait for your session. With that, be our guest and take the floor.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome and introduction. I'm really glad to be here. Honestly, I love to share my passion for my field and what I do. So I'm also very glad to be here. My name is Shayleen, and today I'm going to be giving a talk on space biology, talking about how it can progress from Earth labs all the way to deep space missions. But before that, I'll do a little bit about me. I got my Bachelor's of Science degree in neuroscience at the University of Alberta in 2024. In my honors thesis, I was researching the efficacy of anti-epileptic or anti-seizure drugs in reducing cognitive deficits in zebrafish as a model for dementia. That's where I really found my passion for neuroscience research. From there, in 2025, I attended the Space Studies program at the International Space University. And it really allowed me to connect my background in biology to the space world, but also be able to bridge the gap that existed in my mind between biology and neuroscience and the outer space field. From there, since 2025, I've been enrolled as a PhD student in biological sciences here at the University of Alberta, but I specifically am investigating the effects of galactic cosmic radiation on zebrafish nervous system as a model for astronaut health. I'll discuss my research a little bit more in detail further on, but I want to answer a couple of the big questions first. For example, what is space biology? Space biology is really about how living organisms or tissues adapt to space conditions. The space environment is harsh on the body, but not just human body, every living organism. And the space biology really investigates that and investigates what those effects look like. So we can get started with a general question of what would fail first, an astronaut or a spacecraft? The thing about spacecrafts is that you can engineer them. A lot of the times you can control what material you're using, in what fashion, how big you want something to be, how small you want it to be. You're engineering the spacecraft to match the conditions of space. However, with human beings or living organisms, you don't have that luxury. You can't just genetically engineer a superhuman to be able to withstand harsh conditions of space, at least not yet. So with an astronaut going into space, they are more likely to fail first if we don't take the precautions and if we don't have the correct countermeasures in place. A lot of times spacecraft can protect our astronauts, but we need to know how else we can protect them in space. So that's the reason why biology is one of the biggest challenges in space exploration. We still haven't had a lot of things figured out. And the thing with humans is that we are variable. Not everybody's going to react the same to everything, right? Even if you give a certain drug to somebody, it might work on one person, but it might not work on the other. Same thing goes for space condition. Some people can really withstand harsh conditions, some people can't. And there's no way of knowing until you actually put them into space. But on top of that, we were not evolved for space conditions, right? We were evolved to be here on Earth. So as we venture out into deep space, it's important to understand how we can combat these problems. So space conditions can impact living organisms in three major ways. One of them is microgravity, and that's the changes in the physical forces in the human body. So things like density loss in bones, things like muscle atrophy, but also fluid shifts that can affect your cardiovascular system and can also affect your brain by having all the fluid kind of built up in your head because there's no force pulling it down. There's also psychological stressors, things like confinement or isolation. These can all affect how an astronaut would feel in space, but also if we want to establish a lunar base or eventually make it to Mars, psychological stressors compound with time. The last one is radiation, and it's one that we don't really know as much about because in our International Space Station, we're actually protected from this radiation that I'll get to in a little bit. But radiation can affect things like your DNA integrity. It can cause oxidative stress, which can lead to higher inflammation levels and general damage to the central nervous system, like your brain and spinal cord. So these are some of the reasons why space can actually be very harmful for humans. So how can we combat that? Why does space biology matter? So biology, again, as I said, limits deep space missions. A mission like the International Space Station only takes a couple months. We send our astronauts there, and even after they come back, they actually have quite a few health problems, like their muscle loss or bone loss. But also sometimes they come back with a weaker vision. All of these effects, to some extent, are recovered after they spend some time on Earth. Some of them take a couple days to recover, but some people take up to a year. So now I want you to think about what happens when instead of a couple-month mission somewhere in low Earth orbit turns into a longer mission, maybe a year-long mission on the moon, or multiple years with Mars. With sustained presence or trips that don't have a quick return, the biological hazards are going to scale. Your brain is going to be impacted more for a longer duration of time. Your mental health could suffer. Your physical strength and coordination can suffer. But also, the recovery that you can have can be impacted. If it takes you a couple of weeks to recover from a 3-month mission, are you going to recover from a 3-year mission? To what extent? Right? These are all things that we need to consider before we send humans to deeper space. And right now, with the Artemis mission at NASA, there is this eagerness to have a sustained presence on the moon or a lunar base. But we don't really know how we can survive on the moon because we've barely been figuring out how everything works on the International Space Station. So that's why space biology really matters. A Mars mission isn't just an engineering problem, right? You want to send people up to Mars, but it's a biological endurance test. And problem with that is that right now, a lot of the attention is on how do we get there, right? Majority of NASA workers, but not just NASA, a lot of other space agencies, they're engineers, they're astrophysicists. They're very focused on the space aspect, which is what we need right now. That's absolutely true. But that's when the other aspects, like the human biology side, comes to academia. Academic world takes that burden a little bit because it gets spread out. They support different researches, but it's up to universities really to be investigating these effects. Because let's say that they figure out a way to get there. Okay, but what happens when the technology is here, but our biological knowledge isn't? Are we going to send astronauts up there not knowing what is going to happen to them? And to what extent is that ethical? That's when it becomes really important to do biological research. There's 3 types of biological research. One of them is astronauts in space, and space agencies usually do conduct these research. It's the real deal, right? You actually have humans up in space, and you can actually examine what happens. There's also human analog experiments, which use humans again, but on Earth. So the effects, they try to simulate the effects of space to the best of their abilities. And lastly, we have model organisms or human cells and organs. And I'll get to that in a little bit. So with astronauts in space, again, that's exactly what happens. It's great. What the amount of knowledge we get from sending people up there is truly enormous and very important. But there's small sample sizes, and they're often also biased. Like until recently, they were biased towards the male population because we mostly had male astronauts. There's also ethical limits. You can't stick a probe into an astronaut's brain and examine what happens, right? There's also a high cost and there's long timelines. It's costly. You have to wait a long time to get results. That's when human analog experiments can be quite helpful because you can experiment different conditions of space. It won't be everything at once, but sometimes that's good. For example, with the waterbed, you test for lack of gravity or a one uniform force acting on you. And that can really tell you exactly how much microgravity contributes to a certain thing, taking away radiation, taking away stressors like psychological stress. So you can learn stuff from that, but it also has similar limitations. There's ethical costs. It's also very timely, and your sample sizes are, again, not as high as you would want them to be. You can also not really test countermeasures or drugs at the human level. We usually start with a phase 1 or phase 2 approach. We start at animal model level, which is where we get to model organisms. So model organisms are very helpful because they offer shared conserved brain and cellular pathways, right? Like different body systems, they can share that. So I have a zebrafish on the screen, which a lot of people don't even know what these little guys are, but these are actually the animals that I work with personally. And they are very handy because they are model organisms for humans, but they're so small. And even at the larval stage, you get them even smaller. So you can get very high sample numbers. You can test multiple different things at the same time, and you have a higher sample output. They're also rapidly developing. So an adult stage is after 4 months. They're fully adults. They're also useful because you can, again, I'm talking about zebrafish because I'm kind of the zebrafish in space person, but there's also, like, this goes for any model organisms, right? Like rodents or even fruit flies. All of those are just as applicable, and they each offer different advantages. But with model organisms in general, you can experiment causation studies better. While you can't genetically engineer a human to have a certain protein expressed or light up, you can do that with animal model organisms. So you can track what is happening on a physiological level relatively easier, right? You can see what's lighting up, you can see what cells are more expressed, what's less expressed. And it also allows us to, if we wanted to portray a specific gene, we can also do that. We can genetically manipulate our animals to have that. And again, if we want to test countermeasures, we always start at the model organism level before we make it to the clinical world, which is where we actually test out the drugs on humans. So those are just kind of the general 3 biological researches you can do. My specific research looks at radiation, and it looks at galactic cosmic radiation in specific. And I'm looking to see to what extent the cosmic radiation can affect DNA, can lead to oxidative stress or neuroinflammation, which is inflammation in your brain. So galactic cosmic radiation, it sounds almost really futuristic, but it's quite simple. It's the radiation that comes from the galaxies further away or from supernovas. So we have the solar radiation that comes from our star, the sun, but we also get our radiation from the further away galaxies. On Earth, we're lucky enough, fortunate enough to be protected from all of these radiations by the Earth's magnetic field. The magnetosphere around Earth protects humans on Earth, but also humans on the International Space Station, because the International Space Station is on low Earth orbit, which is still protected by the magnetic field. The problem is that deep space missions provide very little to no natural shielding. So when you exit our magnetosphere, you're basically left to fend for yourself. And Moon and Mars missions definitely expose astronauts to a lot of galactic cosmic radiation. So why it's dangerous is because they have heavy ions in them. So like carbon or iron ions, they're high energy particles that can penetrate not just tissues, but also spacecraft. So you're not safe in any of your spacecrafts. And even right now, there's no shielding that we have that can protect our humans from galactic cosmic radiation. So there's kind of 2 aspects to this, working on the physical science, trying to engineer something that can protect the astronauts, but there's also the biological side of trying to understand what is happening and how we can control it. Radiation can damage the central nervous system, but it can also damage a lot of other things. But it's been linked to memory impairment and slowed reaction time. And I don't think I need to tell you that when you're sending an astronaut to Mars, you want them to not have a slow reaction time. You want them to be cognitively sound, because once you send them up there, again, they're by themselves. To get feedback from them, be able to communicate back to Earth, will take a substantially longer amount of time. So it's an even more individualized mission. So it's dangerous, but the chance of being hit by cosmic radiation is low. But if you get hit, it can be very damaging because of their high penetration value. And not only do they penetrate through tissues very easily and in a very damaging way, but as they make that primary damage, there's also secondary damage that can spread to the tissues around it. So it can be quite dangerous. So the problem we have is that we have no protection. There's no effective countermeasures, not on a biological level, but also not on an engineering level. And the risk of being hit by one of these rays increases with mission duration. And because of that, and because of the fact that astronaut health is always our priority in mission success, it's really important to study this better before we consider long-term missions. That's where my research comes in. I'm using zebrafish as a model organism here, and I'm really trying to answer two questions. Does cosmic radiation change brain structure, and does it affect cognition and behavior? How I'm doing this, I actually am blasting them with galactic cosmic radiation, but not the one in space, the one that we can actually simulate here on Earth. So the FAIR GSI facility is a facility in Germany that is able to simulate galactic cosmic rays very accurately, and it's one of the only facilities that can do it. It has the iron, the heavy ion, like the iron and the carbon qualities that can really mimic what's happening in space. And so I'm hoping that after radiating the fish with a certain dosage of this radiation, we can examine what happens to their brain, what happens to inflammation, and then how they behave and act. But all of this is happening when the fish are at like 5 days old. So they're very small. And so we can get really meaningful data, and we can continue to grow them after to look at them at the adult stage, which is pretty neat. So that's kind of what space biology is, how I took that in and took it very personally and decided to explore it. And now we get to, is the space industry really hard to pursue? Is it hard to be an astronaut? Yes, it is incredibly hard to be an astronaut. But there are so many different ways to be involved in space that I think sometimes can get missed. Later, we're gonna talk about you applying what you love into the space industry, but we'll get to that. I don't want to spoil it yet. But there's so many different ways you can get involved, and every field can be involved. Space is truly an interdisciplinary field, and that's, I think, what I love the most about it. When I started, I thought I wanted to be an astronaut. That was like my first dream job. I wanted to be an astronaut. I had my mindset on it for exactly like a couple of years before I realized I cannot become an astronaut, which I was at 7, so I was being very realistic for my age. And then I decided to be an actress because I thought that was easier or makes more sense. It's also quite a jump. And then I was like, actress and astronaut, these are so unrealistic. In high school, I made my mind up to do the next easiest path, which is a medical doctor, apparently. Again, being a medical doctor was also it's not very easy, but it never felt quite right to me. I felt like it didn't click into place. It was the only thing that I felt like I could see myself do, because I do love biology, I do love medicine. So that's how I got involved into neuroscience research, and I started doing neuroscience research, and I really felt like I was in my element as a researcher, and I really wanted to continue that, but I didn't know in what field. I wasn't super set on one thing that I loved. And then I got the opportunity to do this project and do space biology research. And in that moment, I felt like everything just kind of fell into place. I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. And I took every single step I could to make sure that it becomes a reality, that is possible. I took every opportunity I was given. I worked hard to get extra opportunities and to really make sure that I'm setting myself up for success. And so it this this space in general is so cool, but people kind of shy away from it because it's a little bit crazy. But what I love to say is that you know, you have to find your crazy dream and just be crazier than it. It's quite simple. When you find something you love, just jump on it and work so hard. And if you really do have the passion for it, you will get there. It worked for me, and I still have a long way to go, but I feel like I'm getting closer and closer to my goal every day. Because I was a little kindergarten graduate back in Iran, and now I graduated at the University of Alberta with my Bachelor's of Science, and then I was doing my fun research on zebrafish neuroscience, and then I met astronauts. And I went to the space studies program, and I was able to represent Canada in one of the coolest programs that I've ever heard of. And I was able to make a CubeSat, get a lecture from uh, the astronaut that worked on the Hubble telescope. I won a model rocket competition for some reason. I don't know what about biologist was doing with that, but I did. It was fun. And then we had a downlink with the International Space Station, and we were able to talk to them. And then that brings me to a couple months back, or a month back, where I went and visited the facility that I'm going to be conducting my radiation research at in Germany. And it was so cool to be at a particle accelerator facility, because I really felt like I was living my Big Bang Theory dreams. I was like, this is so amazing. And again, this is only the start. I have so much more to go, but I also started very young, not knowing exactly what feels right to me. And I just paved this path that got me to where I am. And I think that's because of the love I had for biology, and neuroscience. I think that's one of the things that I love the most about what I do. I love the brain and how it works. And I was able to apply that to another field that I loved, which brings me to our activity. And I'd love if some of us can get involved in this at least. But I want you to think about a topic that's of interest to you, whether if it's something you're studying or something you want to study or something that you're just interested in. It doesn't have to be related to space. It's actually better if it isn't. And then I want you to think about how you can apply that in the space industry in a way that it can either advance the space industry, or or space can help advance the field. Okay, and when I say it can be anything, I literally mean anything, because you can think about law, right? If you're a lawyer, you can be a space lawyer. Absolutely. There's so many contracts that governments have to make with each other to launch things, to do things, who owns the moon, who can own, there's so many things in every field. So whether if it's business or engineering or physics or law or whatever it is, can be applied. And I think it would be really fun, once we think about it a little bit, for people to get a chance to talk about it, because the first step into achieving your dreams is, saying it out loud and making it a real thing. So I was thinking we can take a couple minutes here and then think about some stuff that maybe we could say, and then I'll go first, so I wouldn't be a hypocrite. But then I would really love, and it would be really fun if some people could follow up and we can have a quick discussion about it. Are there any questions about it? Do you guys want some time to think about it? I also can't see my meet screen, so I don't know what's going on.
Don't worry. I think they just need maybe a minute or two for them to type their answers in the chat box. And once they do, I can read them out to you. And then there could be like a mini discussion.
Okay, that sounds great.
Perfect. So then let's take a 2-minute breather.
Sounds good.